It is the first joint program between the Jewish Policy Center and the Energy Growth and Security Program at the International Tax and Investment Center. I am Shoshana Bryant. I'm Senior Director of the Jewish Policy Center, and our goal today, I'm going to share a lot of goals, but our goal today is to give you a broad picture of American foreign and geoeconomic policy and strategy in Central Asia. Because we haven't been together before, I'm going to take a minute or 2 minutes and introduce us to each other. 2 minutes on the Jewish Policy Center, 2 minutes on ITIC, and then we will move to our speakers. Jewish Policy Center was founded in 1985. We are a nonprofit organization. We do foreign and domestic policy. You can find us on our website at jewishpolicycenter.org. Insight articles, In Focus magazine. In Focus is sort of around here somewhere on your desk. The JPC supports a strong U.S. defense capability, U.S.-Israel security cooperation, and missile defense. Domestically, we have a broad agenda, which includes small government, low taxes, free trade, fiscal responsibility, energy security, free speech, and intellectual diversity. And we're really strong on those last two these days because occasionally we think we're in trouble. ITIC is also a nonprofit organization. It had its start in 1993. It's dedicated to advancing awareness on a wide range of issues, including the global energy sector, security, geoeconomics, and all of that particularly in Central and South Asia. ITIC has worked with American and international organizations, both private and public, provides expert support on issues including privatization, reputational management. I can think of so many people that could use experts on reputational management. Geoeconomics, political risk analogy, energy economics, macroeconomic stability, investor attraction, and more. It works to facilitate a broad and public consensus of the opportunities in the region and to deepen bilateral relations among countries that have a lot in common. And that's where the title of this program about Central Asia and the Abraham Accords comes from, because this may be a moment in which to broaden bilateral cooperation among countries that have kind of been looking at each other for a long time, but maybe weren't doing it. So I'm going to introduce all of our speakers. This is such an awkward way to do this. There should be a podium here so you don't see my notes. But okay, I'm going to introduce all of our speakers. Each will take about 10 minutes to make a presentation, and then we'll do Q&A. So our first speaker is going to be Ariel Cohen, an internationally known expert on energy policy, Russia, Eurasia, Eastern and Central Europe, and the Middle East. I mean, his list of accomplishments is long, and he is an authority on political and security risk management, economic development, economic policy, rule of law, crime and corruption, market entry strategies, and other aspects of state business relations. Aside from being a senior fellow at the ITIC, he is also a non-resident senior fellow at the Atlantic Council. He has written many books. He has been everywhere you think he should be in the media. And he is the author of a really terrific article on Central Asia and the possibilities, which appeared in our magazine, In Focus Quarterly. You can find it on your table and read the whole thing. It is terrific. Stephen Blank is an internationally recognized expert on Russian foreign and defense policies and in international relations across the former Soviet Union. He is also a leading expert on European and Asian security, including energy issues. Since 2020, he's been a senior fellow at the Foreign Policy Research Institute, the United States Institute of Peace, the American Foreign Policy Council, and the Strategic Studies Institute of the U.S. Army War College have all benefited by Steve's broad and deep understanding of a region that Americans need to know better than I think we know it. So I'm happy that he's out there doing it. He has testified frequently before Congress. He's consulted to the CIA, to major think tanks and foundations, and he's chaired international conferences and been a commentator on foreign affairs everywhere you think he should be, and we're hoping he finds more outlets. He also, by the way, speaking of more outlets, He also appears in this issue of In Focus magazine. So after you've finished reading Ariel's piece, you can read Steve's piece. Our third panelist is Margarita Asanova, Senior Fellow at the Jamestown Foundation. She is a regular contributor to the Jamestown publication Eurasia Daily Monitor. She comments on political and energy security developments in the Balkans and Central Asia. Excuse me. Her books include Eurasian Disunion, Russia's Vulnerable Flanks, a critical study on Russian subversion in Europe, Eurasia, and Central Asia. She is a recipient of, which I didn't know existed, of the John Knight Professional Journalism Fellowship at Stanford University for her work on nationalism in the Balkans. And I kind of wish we were going to go do that today. That sounds so interesting. She's authored book chapters and journal articles on a wide range of issues having to do with security, energy, and democracy. She's been published by CSIS, by Freedom House, and by the Jamestown Foundation. Our fourth speaker is Dr. Kamran Bokhari, Senior Director at the New Lines Institute, where he served as Director of the Analytical Development Department of the Institute until 2003. He is a national security and foreign policy specialist at the University of Ottawa. They need some. And he also served, I'm sorry, it's a little anti-Canadian.
Preceding was an unpaid political announcement.
Wait, he was what? An unpaid?
Unpaid political announcement.
I just think somebody should be advising Canada right now.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. And now we're going to find out what he has to say about Canada. No, we're not. He has presented papers to various analytical and media organizations and has briefed various American, Canadian, and UK government agencies on Central and South Asia and the Middle East, which is going to bring us to where we want to be on the Abraham Accords. And geopolitics, democratization, civil-military relations, and comparative political systems. I don't usually reach this far back in biographies, but Dr. Bokhari's doctoral thesis, see, I don't go back that far now. That's because I'm old and I don't want to go back that far. It's entitled Moderation Among Salafists and Jihadists. And I think we should ask him about that regardless of what the topic of the day is. We need information. And now our panel, and Ariel Cohen, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Shoshana. I'm excited to do our first event together. I'm also excited that at least 4 professors of Eurasian and Central Asian Studies are here. Georgetown National Defense University, GW, Steve and Margarita, 5 professors. So I feel like thesis defense or something like that. If I count Wes, who also taught, so 6 professors, it goes up and up. I think that today's C5+1, Central Asia plus the United States summit, is a real turning point. It's a geostrategic and geoeconomic turning point. Why am I saying that? Because it looks like the attempt, at least the initial wave of the China-Russia axis to put US on our back foot and push in Europe is not doing that well. If you look at the very slow slug the Russians are experiencing in Ukraine and projecting it forward, it doesn't look like Ukraine is going to collapse soon, and the balance of power in Europe will shift quickly. And that, I argued, even before the war started, that was the main goal of Vladimir Putin. Russia is not doing very well in the Middle East. They lost Assad. And now Wesley is writing an article about Wagner or Africa Corps, Russian Africa Corps, failing to protect the regime in Mali, where they replaced the French a couple of years ago, but did not deliver, and the jihadis are at the gates of Bamako. People in Central Asia are not stupid. They survived there for thousands of years. They know they sense shifts in the balance of power. And the outreach from Kazakhstan, from Uzbekistan, and other countries to the West and to the United States is more palpable. There are deals being cut, there are big transactions being done. You saw the Boeing transaction between Uzbekistan and Boeing. We saw the locomotive transaction. For Boeing was $8 billion, locomotives for Kazakhstan, $4.2 billion was Wabtec. There are memoranda being signed on rare earth, which are top priority. I can't stress enough what priority rare earth elements and strategic minerals, it's not the same, are for the Trump administration. Trump was engaged in a peace deal between Congo and Rwanda. Rare earths are front and center. India, Pakistan, $500 million deal with Pakistan. Ukraine, rare earth. I'm probably missing a couple.
Australia.
Australia, big source of rare earth. So a lot of people criticize Trump, and a lot of people criticize Trump deservedly. But on rare earths, rebuilding the supply chains away from China, it's a top priority for this administration. And as you always hear in Kazakhstan, they have all of the periodic table, or they call it Mendeleev table, inside the rocks there. Shadow was right. It's not a good arrangement. C5 plus 1, C5 hold 38.6% of global magnesium reserve, 30% of chromium, 20% of lead, 12% of zinc, 8.7 titanium, and I didn't get to uranium yet. Uranium, of course, is not a rare earth. It's a source of energy for nuclear reactors, and you see now how our IT and AI purveyors are going after every available nuclear reactor they can put their hands on, including the 3 Mile Island deconservation and recommissioning of a 3 Mile Island. On transportation, Eurasia is extremely important because it connects China with Europe and the rest of the western part of the other hemisphere. The railroads are being built. The volumes of cargo are going up significantly. 23 to 24, the volume of cargo went 60%, 60. And it's continuing to go up this year, 24 to 25. There are terrific options to improve energy security, including for Europe after the drying up of the Russian gas supply. A lot of American LNG, liquefied natural gas, went to Europe, but as Sheila Heslin, the senior director at Clinton NSC in the 90s said, happiness is multiple pipelines. So if you get, in addition to American LNG, Qatari LNG, pipe gas from Azerbaijan and even Turkmenistan, if you connect Turkmenistan with a pretty short pipe in the Caspian and start piping that gas to Azerbaijan and then through 2 pipelines called TAP and TANAP, Trans-Anatolian Pipeline, Trans-Adriatic Pipeline, into Europe, you are increasing energy security for the Europeans. So you see sources of uranium, sources of gas, sources of rare earth, and this is an area that is developing pretty rapidly. We published, I think it was with Margarita, right? The water was with Margarita? No. With Wesley and with who else? Alejandro.
Yes.
Right. We published an article on water in Central Asia. Absolutely vital resource. The population is growing fast. It's one of the youngest regions in the world. Because of the global warming, am I allowed to say global warming in a Republican club? Yeah. The evaporation of the Caspian is increasing and less fresh water going to the Caspian. So the Caspian is shrinking. There was an ecological catastrophe there, started last century and continued in the Aral Sea, which initially was a huge freshwater lake, then became a big saltwater lake, and now it's less than half of what it used to be with salt water. So there are massive challenges to the future and the development of water supply in Central Asia. The glaciers are shrinking, et cetera, et cetera. So U.S. has a lot of opportunity to provide water technology that even the Chinese don't have. The Chinese have a lot of very interesting technology on renewables, on electric cars, on all kinds of things. But water technology, U.S. and Israel is still in the lead. So in particular, I would say Kazakhstan is a leading partner. It's a country that produces more than half of GDP in Central Asia. It has the most advanced economic system. It has something called Astana International Financial Center that it's a hub for investment with English law and real life English jurists who live there or adjudicate disputes or advise companies either remotely or in situ. It's building, I think, the first AI large language model in Kazakh language in Central Asia, and it has a lot of uranium, I already said, a lot of coal. They can bring gas from Turkmenistan or Russia to power more and more electric power stations for these AI data centers. But at the same time, there are challenges and limits to our trade relations, something called the Jackson-Vanik Amendment for older people like myself. I am a Jackson-Vanik baby. It was a measure to try and push the Soviets to let the Jews out, to encourage the Jewish immigration. The Soviet Union is no longer here. All the Jews wanted to leave left, but the Jackson-Vanik is still in the books. When I talk to congressional staff, they say, well, yeah, we could waive it, but what can we get for it? And my answer is, you don't get anything for it. It's just a fossil that is in the way of our trade and investment with Central Asia. It's Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan are subject to that. Uzbekistan is pretty much following in the on the route of Kazakhstan in terms of economic reform. After the death of Islam Karimov in 2016, who promoted autarkic path of development for Uzbekistan, it was almost like a hermit kingdom there. I've been there. It wasn't as bad as North Korea, but it was pretty bad. So now it's opened up. They're introducing visa-free travel for older American tourists and to see the beauties of Bukhara and Samarkand. Highly recommended. I've been there, absolutely admired it. And they have the largest population. They have educated workforce. They're building GM cars. They've been building they're building Soviet aircraft. So there's a potential there. So to conclude, based on my article, these are culturally moderate Sunni Muslim countries that have relations with Israel since their independence, 30-some years ago. A lot of good ties, and they're making noise that they want to join the Abraham Accord. Why not? Azerbaijan is making a lot of noise that they want to join the Abraham Accord. You saw President Aliyev sitting next to President Trump in Sharm el-Sheikh summit. So imagine Abraham Accords going beyond the Emirates into Azerbaijan and Central Asia. What a wonderful force field for prosperity, for investment, for economic development, and yes, for American security. Thank you very much.
Steve.
Do you want to stick, can he stay there or can he sit?
I mean, I'll go up there. Just hold on to the microphone for a minute.
I'll hold.
Steve, if you want to sit at that table.
I'm gonna sit at that table.
need his podium?
No.
Ariel doesn't like it when I leave on.
Josh.
All right, so you're going to sit.
I'm gonna sit on.
All right. Does the camera capture Dr. Boyd?
Wait a minute. He'll tell you which one to sit in. I think it's this one.
That's good.
That's good? Okay. Sit.
All right.
Here we go.
Thank you. I had major surgery 2 weeks ago, so I'm lucky to be here. And I wrote this in the hospital. So, as you know, today is the summit of the C5+1 Central Asian states and President and America, represented by all the 6 presidents. President Trump hosting this at the White House. I think it's the first time it's ever been done at the White House. It's a good sign for the future. There's also talk about President Trump making a state visit to Central Asia, which is important. And it's important for the reasons that Ariel has talked about, because for 30 years, many of us, Ariel, myself, Fred Starr, and people like that, have been calling for a much more developed and stronger U.S. strategic presence. And I don't mean military. I mean political and economic in the first order, in Central Asia and the Caucasus, in order to prevent the kind of security collisions we're seeing now in Ukraine. And we haven't seen it. If you read the first Trump administration Central Asia program, which I guess Lisa Curtis, who was the assistant secretary in those days, wrote, it's very good, but very little was implemented. Biden did somewhat better, but again, there's no compelling strategic vision as to what the United States wants to accomplish with Central Asia and how we're going to let the Central Asians accomplish their objectives, which are basically to maintain a strong connection to the United States in order to balance China off against Russia. In other words, to follow a, quote, multi-vector foreign policy, which is what small and middle powers do when they're confronted by the threat of great powers. And neither Russia nor China really believes that the Central Asian states are truly sovereign entities that should be allowed to decide for themselves what their foreign policy is, or ought to be. So they want us there, and it is to the credit of the Trump administration that they have understood, at least in inception, that we want to be there and that they want us there. Now, the shining example of this up until now are not only the deals that Ariel mentioned between Boeing and the railroad companies and so on, but the trip Trump rode for international peace and prosperity in Armenia. It is a really original and innovative solution to bring the Azeri-Armenian war to an end, to facilitate the middle corridor between China and Central Asia and Europe, because the road is going to go through those lands, the corridor that is, and to establish a lasting American presence in the Caucasus. And it's important for Central Asia as well that we're in the Caucasus, because if you follow what Azerbaijan has been doing in the last 5 years with Central Asia, you can say without provoking laughter that Azerbaijan and Central Asia are joined at the hip, economically and strategically. It's not Caucasus here, Central Asia there, but rather a growing integration and a growing sense in Baku of a regional perspective, which is reciprocated on the other side of the Caspian Sea. So the trip is really a major innovation, needs to be followed up by regular consultations among the parties, and we are already seeing investments going to the building and sustaining of the trip, and what's more, America will provide security for it. That means there will be a small but meaningful American security presence in the Caucasus, and that also has resonance throughout the Caucasus and Central Asia. So, apart from the geoeconomics that Ariel has talked about, that I'm talking about, there needs to be a true understanding of the strategic interest of the United States in Central Asia that is regularly sustained and manifested through policy initiatives. It's not just that the Central Asians want this, otherwise they wouldn't be sitting in Washington today talking to the president and going all about town at conferences, speaking to people and commissioning articles and so on. We have to want it, and what's more, it's not enough to put out a good policy paper, as the Trump administration did 7 years ago. You have to do it day by day. And that means there has to be reforms in American policymaking and in American policymaking structures. And those have not yet happened. Now, what are those reforms? I would argue that you have to give Central Asia and Caucasus the bureaucratic status in the state defense departments, Treasury, Energy Department, and elsewhere that they deserve. For example, there needs to be an assistant secretary for Central Asia, not South Asia and Central Asia. South Asia is a critical region. Everybody here understands that. We have major issues with regard to India and now Pakistan. Those take up a lot of time. There are a lot of threats in that area between Pakistan and India. We just saw one a few weeks ago. And the person who was assistant secretary for that region, and the desk officers under him or her, and the ambassadors and the embassy staffs and all that, have their hands full dealing with those regional issues. So there needs to be an assistant secretary for Central Asia who can be in regular conversation with his or her counterparts in the embassies here, or with equivalent officials in those capitals. The same is true for the Pentagon. The same should be true for the Treasury Department and Energy Department. Furthermore, it would be useful if EPA and the Central Asian governments had a direct relationship. Ariel mentioned water. To be blunt about it, Central Asia faces the real danger of losing its water supplies. Millions of people who do not have enough water. We have already seen what that means in terms of economic, social, and military phenomena in Africa.
And in Iran.
And in Iran. And believe me, as you all know, it's not pretty. And it has ramifications that go beyond their borders. What happens in North Africa does not stay in North Africa. And the same is true about the Sahel. And you just walk down the street in Paris and you'll see the results, because as social science teaches us, migrants move to better paying, better economic conditions. And if you can't get water for yourself or your family, you're going to be out of there. What's more, water crises, as a lot of social science literature teaches us, provokes conflicts. The last thing anybody wants in Central Asia, including Central Asian governments, are conflicts. And we need to be able to contribute, and we have the means to do so to an extent greater than anybody else in the world, to provide environmental investment, technology, and support for Central Asia on a grand scale that will permanently establish a thriving dialogue among Central Asian states who have to share the water and with the United States. So there's a vast economic area, not just water. Ariel spent a lot of time on talking about rare earths. I'm writing an article about rare earths right now. And they're all over Central Asia, and everybody and his uncle is trying to get them. Ariel did not mention about the EU's growing interest in Central Asia. Macron, Scholz, while he was Prime Minister of Germany, David Lammy, the British Foreign Minister, have recently been there in the last year or two. The EU is making major plans for investments in Central Asia because they too need rare earths. They need the energy. They need the access. They do not want to see this area become prey to Chinese and or Russian influence either. So what we need is a sustained bureaucratic reform at home in order, as I said, to sustain the initiatives that are probably being carried out right now as we speak down the road, and to build upon the deals that have already been made or that are in discussion today. We need to enhance connectivity, things like the Middle Corridor, even though China benefits from the Middle Corridor, Central Asia and the Caucasus benefit as much, if not more, and Europe benefits immensely. We need to be able to bring Central Asian energy to Europe as an alternative to Russian energy, because they will be running short of that. We also need to end the possibilities for conflicts, as we did in the Caucasus, in Central Asia, and to establish a permanent and meaningful political and economic presence in order to counter the threat of either Russian or Chinese influence becoming predominant. Now, the Russians, since the war in Ukraine, have relied a great deal on Central Asia to get around sanctions. They've opened up businesses. The trade numbers with Russia are off the chart in the last 3 years. And it's not due to the fact that Central Asia suddenly became a gold mine, but rather that people are bypassing sanctions by rerouting goods to Central Asia, and then shipping them to Russia. If we want to stop that kind of behavior, we need to be able to have the kind of relationship where we can tell the Central Asians that there is a cost for doing that, cost for not supporting the sanctions, but a benefit for cooperating with the United States, and that they can see the difference in our policy. So there are opportunities, not costs, and that's very rare in today's world. There are opportunities, but not costs, in dealing with Central Asia by the United States. This is the time. The administration has taken some constructive steps already, but it needs to integrate those steps into a vision and to effectuate permanent policy changes that will last beyond its tenure in office, so that in 5 years or 4 years from now, if there's another meeting about the U.S. and Central Asia, Ariel and I don't have to say, as we have, that until now there has been no Central Asian strategy, and the bureaucratic impetus for meeting with Central Asia is lagging, and that Central Asia is not a priority in U.S. policy. That needs to change, and hopefully, starting today, it will. Thank you.
Thank you all. I will be very brief, making a few remarks about regional cooperation and regional integration in Central Asia and how this impacts U.S. policy, or how it incentivizes U.S. policy. As you know, the U.S. government has been supportive of cooperation in integration in the region since the early 90s. It started when the Central Asian states established a nuclear-free zone, the first in the world, actually, and then the Central Asia Economic Union. But that was back in the 90s, when the countries were coming out of the Soviet system and they were focusing on themselves. They're focusing on developing their own economies, which were crushed by the Soviets and were designed to serve the Soviet economy and not to serve the needs of the nation. They were consolidating independence. They were focused on themselves, and very often you would see them in the 90s and even early 2000s, mostly competing with each other for attention, for deals, for economic development and cooperating. But that changed, and it changed pretty much after 2015, when the Kazakh ambassador here to Washington, Kairat Umarov, proposed the C5+1 mechanism involving the United States more in Central Asia. The time was very important. The timing was very important. We had just announced that we're leaving Afghanistan, we're withdrawing troops from Afghanistan after 2014. The military base in Manat in Kyrgyzstan was closed at that time. Karshi in Uzbekistan was already closed. So the U.S. presence was getting diminished in the region. We're moving to Romania, we're moving to the Caucasus with our flights. The northern distribution network was changing direction to the west. So the Central Asian states felt that they needed to attract somehow the attention of the United States administration and also European presence in order to balance China and Russia. And let's not forget that that was the time of the Silk Road, the Silk Road initiative of the Chinese government, China's Silk Road, which later became the Belt and Road Initiative, and it continues, but not with the same intensity as it was back in 2013 until 2019. There was a lot of investment. The Chinese were not investing, getting involved in anything that was less than $5 billion. So the size of investment was really huge, and that kind of made the Central Asians very wary of where this is going. We have on the one side, they were saying the Russian bear, on the other side the Chinese dragon, and they were between the two trying to find themselves and trying to find a way to be put on a map. And the only way to be put on the map was to start really cooperating with each other and make the region a politically important, diplomatically important region. And I think they've managed to do that in the last 10 years. 2 years ago, the B5+1 was established, which was the business wing, the private sector wing of C5+1, which is a very important platform because this is where the dialogue happens between government and businesses, and this is where the policies that need to take place in Central Asia are being fostered and being discussed. Also, the timing of 2015 C5+1 was not by chance. Russia had just annexed Crimea and had attacked Donbass. The Central Asian nations are becoming very, very worried. What is next and what is going to happen to them? So they started consolidating the region. Then in 2022, there was a big meeting in Kyrgyzstan between the 5 presidents of the Central Asian states, and they signed really critical agreements at the time, and they planned others for the future. And it was not by chance. 22 was the year when Russia invaded Ukraine and launched the full-scale invasion of Ukraine. That worried the governments of Central Asia as well. So they realized they need to be united, they need to integrate, they need to develop mechanisms to survive in an environment that was becoming very dangerous for them in many ways. The changes were not necessarily threatening them with military intervention, but they were changing the environment, they were changing the way trade was working, the way exports were working, the way economies were working, especially after the pandemic. That was a warning sign that they needed to cooperate better. This administration has continued a tradition of cooperation that started under Obama and then continued under Trump administration and under Biden administration. But now we see, as Ariel pointed out, much more concrete approach. And this transactional policy of Trump may actually benefit both the United States and Central Asia in terms of rare earth minerals and other resources that are very important. So what needs to happen next is the important part. What needs to happen in Central Asia in order to really open up to more U.S. investment, because we are already present in Central Asia quite significantly. In Kazakhstan, we have huge investments in the oil and gas sector. In Uzbekistan, we have huge investments as well, and this is going to continue. But as Steve Blank pointed out, Central Asia is also expanding. This is not the old region of 5 countries that are not connected, pretty much landlocked, squeezed between Russia and China. They're expanding, and they're expanding west. They're expanding to the Caucasus. They're cooperating with Azerbaijan. Just imagine Azerbaijan built an entire terminal to receive fertilizer from Central Asia to export it to Europe. So the cooperation is on so many levels, particularly with the Middle Corridor, which is a route that connects China through Central Asia with the Caucasus. but the Central Asians can take a huge advantage of that route, especially in terms of enriching uranium in Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan and not in Russia, and exporting those rocks through the middle corridor instead of sending them north to Russia and using the unsecured ways of delivery of those rocks to Western countries. If we transfer technology to Central Asia, as we're planning to do so, one of the very important things we can do is the technology of developing of small reactors, nuclear reactors. We are doing this with Romania already, so it's not something that we haven't done. That could really open up so many opportunities for cooperation between our companies and Central Asian companies. But in terms of what needs to happen next is Central Asia also needs to create a regional good conditions for investment in business. They need to lower the barriers to investment. They need to open the borders for trade. They need to have a little Schengen zone for visas for business and tourism, so that there are no barriers to moving from one country to another in the region. They probably extend it also to the Caucasus. They need to expand the stock market from Astana Financial Center and Almaty Stock Exchange. It can go further. It can involve Uzbekistan. It can involve Kyrgyzstan even. So a regional stock exchange is going to be a very beneficial for the entire Central Asia, potentially the Caucasus as well. And also the region is expanding connections with Afghanistan, with Mongolia. It's not the old 5 countries region anymore. It's much, much larger. It's important also to develop common border control practices, especially in the customs dealings, not only the fees, but also how long you wait between one country and another to cross the border, what are the procedures so that they're simplified for businesses foreign businesses to operate and improve the transportation logistics. And I think Kazakhstan in particular has developed pretty good policies in that respect, allowing foreign businesses to flourish in Kazakhstan. That can be multiplied in other countries. And this is why regional integration is so important. The countries retain their sovereignty, their political sovereignty, their economic sovereignty, but they develop the mechanisms that make trade easier, that make economic development easier, that make logistics and transportation easier. By developing different regional institutions and organizations that can promote those policies and lobby for them, different governments, and have the connection between the private business and the local governments in order to push for such reforms as soon as possible. Thank you.
All right, before I begin speaking, maybe you've seen on your devices, Kazakhstan is joining the Iran Accords. So that's good news. So, okay, I'm supposed to wrap this up, so I'm going to zoom out of all of the details and sort of look at the landscape from 30,000 level view. What are the broad trends? Clearly, Central Asia, which I call the final frontier of the planet, is emerging as a very geopolitically significant place. For reasons my colleagues have gone into many details, I won't repeat those. Geoeconomics, commodities, but not only is Central Asia rising in terms of importance, global importance, the United States is paying far more attention, finally. Some of us have been saying this for years, demanding that various U.S. administrations do X, Y, Z. So it's really good to see that this thing is actually happening. So what is happening under the Trump administration? So broadly speaking, and I know that this is difficult to discern because of the way the president speaks and then the way the media sort of filters it, if you will, to put it mildly.
I'm sorry to bother you, but I just
We have a new geostrategy in the making on a global scale. The United States is moving away from doing all the heavy lifting that it's been doing since World War II. And it's coming up with a new strategy, or actually operationalizing a new strategy that basically has one core principle. We'll make stuff up as we go along, but that's part of the human condition. Nothing wrong with that. But broadly speaking, the United States is basically saying different allied and partner nations and stakeholders in different regions of the world will do the primary, take up the primary role of security in different regions. We're seeing this in the light of the Ukraine war. We're asking Europe to do more. We are seeing this in the light of the upgrading of the Saudi position in the Middle East, Turkey's position. We're trying to achieve a balance of power between Turkey, Israel, and Saudi Arabia. We still haven't figured out Iran. We can't. It's work in progress. Hopefully, in a few years, that'll become more clear or not. But we're also doing this in East Asia. East Asia is a bit different because in East Asia, what we're doing is a maritime space. As an oceanic power, the United States is not going to withdraw from the high seas. And so what we're doing, according to this strategy, is retrenching from conflicts on land, on, let's say, the broader Eurasian landmass. But we're not going to do that in the maritime space. In fact, if you look at the reports, if you look at U.S. military activity throughout the Western Pacific Basin, you'll see an uptick in military activity, the building of bases, redeployment of forces from different parts of the world, and so that's what is happening at the grand level. Now, what does this mean for the topic of today? It means that we have a lot of work that needs to be done. So, part one was what is called TRIP, the Trump Route for International Peace and Prosperity. We all know that the South Caucasus is sort of this choke point in what should be the middle corridor or the Trans-Caspian International Transportation Route. That was resolved to an extent with the end of fighting between Armenia and Azerbaijan, but it required a peace agreement. Now, the peace agreement, from Armenia's point of view, is that, hey, they've taken over Nagorno-Karabakh, but is our southern province of Syunik in danger of being in the future taken over by Azerbaijan? This administration said, okay, how about we take over 27 miles of that, to a 99-year lease, and then let's call it a deal. And I think that's been done. But that only gets us to the Caspian. There's the broad Central Asia. How do we do that? Well, today, what is happening with the summit with the 5 presidents meeting President Trump at the White House, that's a part of it. And I agree with Ariel that we cannot underemphasize this or emphasize it enough, because this is really a game changer. This is upgrading a U.S. posture towards Central Asia. This is the region of the world where we've had the least amount of influence, historically speaking. So this is a new, if you will, stage in the U.S. global architecture. But unlike, us analysts, practitioners, especially people in the military, we love our AORs, the areas of responsibility. I work on the Middle East, I work on South Caucasus, Central Asia. But what we're seeing is it's all one landmass. So why, Abraham Accord, you would think that, okay, it could be Saudi. Earlier when there was that Twitter posting or X post that quoting Special Envoy Steve Witkoff saying another country will be joining the Abraham Accords. So everybody was speculating, and everybody thought, is it going to be Kuwait? Is it going to be Yemen? Is it going to be Saudi? Too early for Saudi, maybe. But we were thinking Middle East. Some of us said, hey, Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, and it turns out it's Kazakhstan. What it means is that this region there's connectivity between those two regions. Azerbaijan is going to play a big role. It's already playing a big role. What becomes of Iran? Iran is going through massive internal stress and strain, and it will change. We don't know what that change looks like beyond broad strokes. The clergy is probably done for, but it's going to be a military-dominated regime. Turkey is also on the northern flank now of on Iran, and has also replaced Iran as the external power in Syria. So there's a lot happening. We have a former head of the Syrian branch of Al-Qaeda, who's now the president of Syria. He's being engaged with by the administration. And so the world is in massive flux. We've just come to a conclusion of a 2-year regional war in the Middle East. And so how all of this architecture comes together is going to be really, really critical to watch. And again, those days of, oh, I work on the South Caucasus, yes, you do, but you don't. We need to move beyond that, because whether it's geoeconomics, whether it's security, diplomacy, we're no longer in that old world of, well, shall we call it the Near East or the Middle East? We're way beyond that. And we're headed towards a new era in which connectivity is the name of the game. Ariel talked about connecting Turkmenistan and its natural gas resources to Azerbaijan. That's just one example where you move beyond two regions, and there's obviously the technological, the logistical challenges of building a pipeline that crosses the Caspian at a time when the future of the Caspian is in question. But it's going to happen in one way or the other. If we're going to see the world, I mean, I wrote a piece this morning, and from the sort of lens of our three adversaries, Russia, China, and Iran. And I was debating with Ariel this morning over Signal, but my argument is that Russia and China and Iran, there's one common denominator. They all have imperatives that they need to realize. And they're very obvious. The Russians need to win in Ukraine in some shape or form and have an economy. The Chinese need to get out from underneath technology restrictions, investment restrictions, and of course trade tariffs. The Iranians need to survive. This regime needs to get to the other side of the chaos intact. All of them need to do a deal with the United States. And I think that that's critical. There's a lot of criticism, but there's very little empathetic analysis of the United States is doing in the media and in the broader sort of epistemic space. But I think that we're in a good spot right now. A lot depends on how we move forward, but we're at a very historic moment, globally speaking. I'm going to stop right there so we can have a conversation. Thank you.
So if we're going to have a conversation, you have to participate. Let's go there first. Would you introduce yourself and then ask a question?
My name is Bob Parker. I really don't have an affiliation. I'm just an interloper. Thank you. Hi, my name is Bob.
It's on.
Okay. Now it's on, I guess. My name is Bob Parker. I'm really here as Shoshana's guest. Thank you for having me. It was very, very interesting. Almost all of you mentioned that part of the future of U.S.-Central Asian relations is investment in areas like pipelines, rare earths, strategic minerals, and so forth. To invest in those kinds of industries and those kinds of operations, it's not just as you all know, it's not a 1-year or 2-year proposition. It's a decades proposition before you start, potentially decades before you start seeing returns, which raises the question of political risk in those countries. So how would you rate their stability? How would you rate their futures? If you were putting your money into the region, what would you say are the prospects 10, 15, 20 years from now?
So look, it sort of reminds me of when we go to Central Asia. All of us have gone to Central Asia, and the Central Asians look at us and say, China is putting so much money there. We're not feeling enough love from you guys. So what's happened? And we keep telling them, and this is a work in progress, that USG can't cut a check and then just drop tens of billions or hundreds of billions of dollars like the president of China can do that. Command in sort of a command style operation. It has to make business sense. So we're stuck with that. That's just how we are. That's just the way of doing business. That's just the nature of capitalism. I think that there are opportunities that private sector entities will have to navigate. They'll have to work closely with USG. They will need to monitor what's really going on. And when I say monitor, I don't mean passive monitoring. I really mean hyperactive monitoring, because this place is changing. I mean, look, just how much has changed. There are many unthinkables that have come to pass in just the last 2 years, and we can go even further back. So there will be opportunities, and I think that investors should be on the lookout and should be creative. In other words, if I'm a company that can afford it, maybe open up sort of like a Eurasia analysis division. I'm just throwing that out there for you.
We're looking for a job. I'm thinking as you ask the question, what are the factors that affect political risk there? As I mentioned before, Kazakhstan is the leader in terms of putting the legal and regulatory framework. Uzbekistan is trying to follow the same direction. There are problems with the three little guys. However, externally, the two factors that I'm watching like a hawk are Russia and China. I think Russia is going to digest its less than spectacular performance in Ukraine with a lot of problems. At the same time, if Russia is stopped in the West and checked by China in the East, one area it might try to compensate its eternal imperial urge. I mean, I'm reading the thick book on the history of the Romanov family. This stuff is going on for centuries. Is this moving south? And Kazakhstan, in that respect, is in danger. China looks like it's pretty stable, and it puts $100 billion a year in trade there. The factor we didn't mention here is radical Islam. Afghanistan is in the south, and organizations such as Hizb ut-Tahrir al-Islami, such as Muslim Brotherhood, such as Al-Qaeda, they're all there. So while you monitor that, it is not news that energy companies, minerals companies, go to frontier markets and invest despite the fact that this is not Switzerland, and it's not. So risk reward, and as Conrad said, the help of the USG. We have DFC, we have Exim Bank, and we need to do more of that. Until very recently, for example, uranium was kept out of the investment basket, and now it looks like it may crawl in. Even International Energy Agency started changing its tune on nuclear energy. So yes, the government does not and should not invest, although you see under President Trump, all of a sudden the USG is buying stock Yeah, I'm rolling my eyes too. But government buying stock in critical companies, whether it's technology or minerals, and we have the toolbox. Now, how did this administration managed or manages this toolbox is a separate discussion that deserve a separate seminar. But we do have those tools, and we are the largest investor in the World Bank.
Thank you.
We talked about this with Dario yesterday. Just one thing I want to mention is that it is absolutely critical time for the United States to be involved as much as possible in Central Asia, diplomatically, business-wise, personal contacts, exchanges, and so on.
Educational.
Why? Yes, educational. Why? Because there will be turmoil in Russia. And we know that. Whether this is going to be a state collapse, whether this is going to be civil war, whether it's going to be political turmoil or disintegration, the turmoil is coming to Russia. The clouds are in the sky. Sometimes we talk about preserving stability, having stability in order to invest. But things work the other way around too. You are there, you're present, you prevent this from happening, because of your presence. This is why it's so important. This southern border of Russia has a lot of American presence and European presence, because whatever happens in Russia does not spill over to the region in terms of refugees, in terms of violence, whatever is going to happen in Russia.
Thank you.
Let me add, if you're going to do a risk assessment of what American corporations can do and should do in Central Asia, it has to begin from the point of what can we offer that they need? Because we're dealing with state-run economies. Even though you might be dealing with a private entrepreneur, there's a state influence there. So, as I mentioned, there's an enormous need for environmental technological transfer. This would be a boon to every government in that country, in that region. Second, connectivity, transport. Third, energy. Fourth, rare materials. Fifth, so on. But there's a big agenda. Now, any major investor should do his careful risk assessment. There's an academic and professional literature out there about what the risks are to Central Asia. I can name some of them. Other people here can name probably even more. And on that basis of an assessment that is professional and in consultation with the Central Asians, who will tell you what they want and what they're prepared to bring to the table and so on. Your corporation, hypothetically, could decide what it needs. What's more, the same process could happen for the U.S. government. So,
One more last question. So,
Quick question.
yeah, so thank you everybody on the panel. I want to congratulate you first because I don't think I've ever seen such a rapid transition from saying, oh, Kazakhstan should join the Abraham Accords to it actually happening. So my question is this. I think a lot of people looking in the region are happy that this happened, but they're also not surprised. Kazakhstan has long been a leader. They've been talking about this for a while. So my question is rather simple. Who's next?
Sean, I think that's you. Who's next? Azerbaijan.
Yeah, I would agree with Margarita. Azerbaijan is the likely candidate for the reasons that I tried to explain earlier. Azerbaijan is far more organically linked with the Middle East. Again, these are artificial AORs that we create. Azerbaijan, all the way up to Dagestan, were part of the Persian Empire not too long ago, until the 19th century, when the Russians took that territory and they had the borders of modern Iran merged. So I think Azerbaijan is going to be there. I also think that another point that I want to make is that my view of, so the question was, did October 7th derail the whole Abraham Accord process? We know we were very close. The Saudis and the Israelis were very close. Prime Minister of Israel and the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia both came on television saying, we're very close. I think, yes, that process did get derailed, but I would use the word delayed, if you will, more than derailed. The reason I say that is that there's a new path towards that. The new path isn't this international stabilization force that's going to be for Gaza. You're going to have up to 7 or 8 Arab Muslim countries who are contributing troops to this ISF that the president has announced.
Not only there, Indonesia first.
Arab Muslim, yeah. And so, if your country is contributing troops to this ISF that's going to be operating in Gaza, there's no way you do that and not coordinate with the IDF. You do. So, in other words, we're not going to have a treaty and then we're going to talk to each other, start to expand the relationship. The relationship will be built de facto, and at the end, there will be a signing ceremony. That's sort of, if I had to make a prediction.
So I want to go to the signing ceremony. But in the meantime, we have kept you slightly longer than we had said we would. And I want to thank everyone for coming. I especially want to thank our panelists who, I don't know, I've been studying this stuff for a long time. I learned a ton. How many people here learned a bunch? All the hands go up. So thank you to the panel. Thank you to the audience. Thank you to Ariel Cohen for working.
I just want to thank Shoshana, of course, thank the panelists, and thank our staff, Wesley, and you're already staying, Wesley, please stand up. And thank you guys. Without you, of course, we couldn't do it.
And speaking of staff, our staff, Josh Cohen Durham. Thank you, Josh.